this week we're talking all about AEW. Two pay-per-views. It's hard to believe because AEW World's End pay-per-view this weekend is getting all the publicity, but don't forget they have a pay-per-view next weekend. And on top of having a pay-per-view next weekend in Japan at the Tokyo Dome, it's a pay-per-view in conglomeration with NJPW, who was having a pay-per-view of their own the night before. I think we all know what it is, and it kind of gets forgotten about because of the time of year. Wrestle Kingdom. So this week it's AEW World's End, a traditional AEW pay-per-view. It's in a traditional American market. And then next week it's Wrestle Kingdom, which is a huge event by itself, but gets forgotten about in the United States because of the fact that not a lot of people follow New Japan religiously. It's only around Wrestle Kingdom time that they may be watching it, some fans at least. And then Wrestle Dynasty the very next day, a pay-per-view that AEW announced just about a year ago that they would be doing in collaboration with New Japan Wrestling on night 2. So if you remember a few years ago, Wrestle Kingdom decided to take a page out of the book at least, of WrestleMania and do the whole 2-night thing, right? Well, this year they're going to do the whole 2-night thing again, but this time it is part of AEW as they'll be doing it with Wrestle Dynasty. So Wrestle Dynasty one night, Wrestle Kingdom the night before. But before we can get to that AEW New Japan Forbidden Door show, if you will, that's going to happen in Japan, we talk about AEW World's End, which is happening this weekend from Orlando. It is the second World's End event. If you remember, last year World's End took place on Long Island. It was the night MJF finally lost the championship and went away for a little while. And since then, it's all been about Adam Cole and MJF, essentially since that 1-year mark ago, right? Because MJF lost the world championship, Adam Cole turned on him, MJF went away for a while, and it's coming full circle because at this weekend's event, AEW World's End, MJF taking on Adam Cole. It is for the AEW Dynamite Diamond Ring. Now, if you don't know what that is, it's a little confusing. It's a little, it's hard to, follow up on a lot of that stuff. But the AEW Dynamite Ring. Okay, so what that is, if you don't know what the AEW Dynamite Diamond Ring is, it's essentially a ring that started out as something that coincided with one of the first Winter is Coming events. And MJF won it back in 2019, I believe, is the first one, right? And he has held the championship ever since. Since then, what you essentially have is a battle royal, where at the end of the battle, whoever wins the battle royal gets to then challenge the person who has the ring from the previous year. MJF won it, 5 years ago. So he defeated people like Orange Cassidy along the way to retain it. He's defeated people like Ricky Starks. He's defeated people like Juice Robinson. And most recently, Adam Cole and Kyle O'Reilly had, because they were co-battle royal winners, had a match on Dynamite. I believe it was December 4th at Dynamite, with the winner facing MJF at AEW World's End to fight for this diamond ring. So that's what we got. It's Adam Cole, who won the Battle Royal. He was a co-winner with Kyle O'Reilly, and he faces MJF, the only ring holder ever of this Dynamite Diamond Ring, valued at around $42,000. Like I said, in the past, it's kind of coincided with Dynamite itself, so this time it moves on to a pay-per-view event, and it coincides with their rivalry that they've had, right? They had an amazing kind of tag team together, made MJF kind of a good guy for a little while because of this tag team that they were doing together, right? Adam Cole ends up turning on MJF, doing that whole thing. Adam Cole gets hurt, comes back. It's kind of over a year-long feud coming to a head here, and it's for the AEW Dynamite Diamond Ring. I think Adam Cole's going to win this. I think the Dynamite Diamond Ring for the first time ever is going to leave the hands of MJF. And, I will say, a lot of people talk about WWE and how MJF was the hottest thing in the world a couple years ago. I am really interested in seeing, how MJF continues to rise. He is not right now at the top of the food chain in AEW, and it hasn't been for a little bit. And I'm wondering if he does get back there. He is an original member of this AEW Dynamite Rise, right? He's an original member of this company. He's there from the very beginning. He was one of the hot stars to essentially get this company ascending to the levels it did. Right now, we know about the attendance concerns that they have. And I think, this company goes as far as MJF goes, right? Because when MJF is hot, this company's hot, and right now MJF is middling in the mid card. With some of the stuff going on, I understand he was a world champion at one point. He can't be the world champion forever, but I'd love to see MJF get back in some of these money feuds at the top of the card. Hope to see him there soon. As some of these other matches on the card, one main one that's kind of built for this pay-per-view is this Continental Classic. I don't know if you've been following. This is the second year of the Continental Classic. It's another thing that needs quite the explanation. You got the blue squad and the gold squad, or the blue league and the gold league. And it's not just a win-or-loss tournament, right? It's about getting points. It's about whoever has the most points from the gold league will face whoever has the most points from the blue league for the Continental Classic Championship. We're down to the semifinals. It's Will Ospreay versus Kyle Fletcher. What a surprise. Two of the hottest guys in the company right now. Two guys who put on an absolute amazing match at AEW Full Gear, the last pay-per-view in Newark, New Jersey. They're squaring off in one semifinal, while Ricochet and Okada, two more amazing talents who also have rivalries with Kyle Fletcher and Will Ospreay. So essentially, this could just be a four-way right from the get-go. But we got these two semifinals on the pay-per-view card, and the winners will face off for the Continental Championship that night as well. Either way, I mean, I cannot wait to see these three matches on the card, the semifinals, then the finals. I think these are absolutely going to steal the show, no doubt about it. I'm looking forward to it very much. Should be a good matches in general. I'm going to say that Will Ospreay comes out on top of all of this. There really is no right or wrong answer with any of this, but I think Will Ospreay comes out on top as the winner. As we move on to the Tijuana Street Fight for the AEW Women's World Championship. That's right, folks. Not the Mercedes Moné Championship. Not that one, right? It's this one that Mariah May has, right? She's had it since she beat Toni Storm. Toni Storm's obviously in the middle of reinventing herself, or, I would say going back and reinventing herself to her old self, if you will. But that's another story for another day, as Mariah May faces off against Thunder Rosa. Thunder Rosa's been getting a little upset at Mariah May for the fact that she's been getting very personal lately, specifically talking about some of Thunder Rosa's family members. That's what kind of stemmed and turned this into the Tijuana Street Fight. It is. Should be a good match. Thunder Rosa, puts on good shows, and it's good to see her on this main stage right here. She's meddled around a little bit too much on some of the undercard shows and some of the collisions on some of the rampages. It's good to see her getting a shot at the world title and getting the shot at the world title on a pay-per-view. As we move on to some of these other matches on the card, and this is not a full card like we're used to. Now, obviously, before here and the pay-per-view gets here, it could get maybe a little fuller, but 8 matches in total on this card heading into the pay-per-view. So right now, 8 matches in total, and 3 of those matches are the Continental Classic semifinal and championship match. So 4 or 5 matches that don't involve the Continental Classic, right? And one of those matches that kind of, I guess it's on the card, and it's got a little bit of a rivalry going on, but it just doesn't have, obviously, the cachet as some of these other main ones. It feel like a WWE style where everything fits. But that's Takeshita and Powerhouse Hobbs. That is a match for the AEW International Championship. Takeshita we saw with Will Ospreay and all those guys in that little feud. He's moved on here to this feud with Powerhouse Hobbs for the International Championship, specifically being the International Champion himself. And Powerhouse Hobbs getting in the mix on this should be interesting, I think, because Takeshita puts on a match that is, amazing every time, especially, too, when he was just with, Kyle Fletcher, Ricochet, Will Ospreay, those guys over there. So looking forward to this match, but I would say it's probably the least important storyline match of this whole card as we move on to Mercedes Moné and Chris Statlander. They're going to do it again. The AEW TBS Championship is on the line in this match. And again, this is a match that, we've seen this feud going on a few times now. This is, yet again, the rematch. It's back on. These two guys, or these two gals, if you will, are going to go at it one more time to World's End. It's a rivalry that's been going on for a little bit. Chris Statlander, we just saw taking on Mercedes Moné at the last pay-per-view, AEW Full Gear. Mercedes Moné retained her championship. So this is where we're at. Another match in this storied feud. Mercedes Moné, Chris Statlander, number 3. These guys are going to go out of the AEW World's End. Should be a good match as we move on to the AEW Women's World Championship. Or let's retract. Let's restate. Let's go back to that. The AEW TBS Championship. We're still talking Mercedes Moné and Chris Statlander before we go to the world title. And one thing you want to take away from maybe what this match has to offer, and you may kind of be forgetting if you're not a huge AEW fan, but Mercedes Moné and Chris Statlander at Full Gear put on the longest pay-per-view women's match in AEW history. And that is saying something because, as we know, they do give time to the women. It was a 19-minute and 25-minute match at the last pay-per-view. It was the third match on the main card. As you know, 1925 isn't really a record-breaking length for a regular match, right, with men or women. But when it comes to women on the card, right, it ended up being, one of the longest matches on that card. It ended up being the longest pay-per-view match in women's history. You might forget that for the fact that, like I said, a lot of matches on the cards go 19 minutes. But in the women's world, that was a new one. So I'm very interested to see where this match goes to follow up that. As again, we talked about Mariah May and Thunder Rosa. That's for the AEW World Women's Championship. And you would forget that that's the main title, the way that they kind of hype up Mercedes Moné and Chris Statlander, or specifically Mercedes Moné, and really make her championship out to be feeling like the main championship because they make her out to be, like the main star of the women's division. But we will move on to the main event, the AEW World Championship. The Death Riders leader, Jon Moxley, still the champion, taking on Orange Cassidy, a rematch per se from the last pay-per-view, but this time he's joined by Hangman Adam Page and Jay White. Now, if you remember, Hangman Adam Page and Jay White had an amazing match at Full Gear themselves. Hangman Adam Page came out near the end after the match of the World Championship at Full Gear. He got involved in a little post-match stuff going on. So now we've got all 4 of these guys in the AEW 4-way match for the World Championship. I don't see Jon Moxley not winning this match. I see him defending his championship and still being the champion by night's end. It'll be interesting to see how the rest of the Death Riders get involved somehow in this match. I think overall it is a solid pay-per-view. I don't think, it is going to be treated as one of the WrestleMania, the All-Ins, the All-Outs, those cards. But either way, looking forward to this event. Should be a good pay-per-view overall. It can't be any worse than last year's, because AEW World's End last year was actually critically thought to be one of the worst AEW pay-per-views ever. So should be interesting to see how they top that. Not a horrible crowd when it comes to the amount of tickets they've already sold in Orlando. They won't be at the Kia Center. And this is where things get very, very interesting. All right, so let's talk about this a little bit, because AEW is going to be in Orlando this Saturday night, right? It is December the 28th. From Orlando, Florida, right? It is going to be this weekend, as a recording, right, at the Addition Financial Arena. Now, if you don't know what that is, that's on the campus of the University of Central Florida. It is an arena that AEW runs quite often. It is not the main arena, home of the Orlando Magic, that could fit around, 18,000 people. But what's really interesting about this overall is that AEW and WWE, we talk about the rivalry. We talk about them in competition, sometimes tongue-in-cheek. But this pay-per-view night, where AEW is running the smaller of the two arenas, WWE is running at the Kia Center for one of their holiday house shows the very same night. They'll be running the SmackDown crew, I can only imagine, because it's SmackDown in Tampa on Friday night, the night before, so I imagine that whatever crew is in Tampa will be in Orlando. But very interesting to see that AEW is going up against WWE, a house show, so a AEW pay-per-view against a WWE house show in the same city on the same night. And as of this recording, WWE has sold more tickets to the house show than AEW has sold to the pay-per-view. And I will say this, without a doubt, right? This show here, whether it's myself and Brandon who run this show and put on the videos here on YouTube, as a wrestling fan, I play it right down the middle. I will be at the Royal Rumble. I will be at WrestleMania. And there's a lot of people, because of the prices, who won't be at WrestleMania this year. But I will be at WrestleMania. I will be at Elimination Chamber. I am a WWE fan first and foremost. But I can tell you that if I was in Orlando this weekend, I would be at AEW World's End. Because I am a wrestling fan first and foremost. And I am not naive to the fact, that AEW struggles with attendance. But that has nothing to do with my wrestling fandom. And AEW is putting on a pay-per-view event, while WWE is putting on a house show event. And I will go to a WWE house show, especially during the holiday tour, because they do put on some great matches. CM Punk and Gunther in Chicago in a cage match. That's going to be a good one, right? Cody Rhodes in a cage match in Orlando that very night against Solo Sikoa. That should be a good one, right? I'm not doubting that the holiday tour for WWE isn't entertaining. But as a wrestling fan, right, you got to go to the pay-per-view event. You have to be watching this pay-per-view event. This has to be the priority, I guess, as a unbiased wrestling fan, right? As somebody who is a sports fan, right, I am not going to say that if I like two sports teams, and even if I like one sports team over the other, the Toronto Blue Jays, they're my favorite sports team, probably over any basketball team or any football team. But if my football team that I like is playing in a playoff game or a meaningful football game, and the Toronto Blue Jays are playing a spring training exhibition game, even though I'm a bigger fan of that team, I am going to watch the thing that matters most, right? The people who are at the AEW house show, or the WWE house show, understand that they're working a house show, while AEW is putting on a pay-per-view event. I can be honest with you, if it was a TNA pay-per-view event against a WWE house show, I would be picking the TNA pay-per-view as well. It's just the stakes. It's just what we do as wrestling fans. We watch these events because of the stakes, because of what's on the line. So if I was ever to watch AEW at any point, I would pick it over WWE when it comes to this, right? And I would pick almost any company when it comes to over a house show, right? It would be very hard pressed for me to find a house show from WWE that I would pick over really any other company putting on a show, because of the fact that house shows are essentially the spring training, the preseason, just for the crowd, right? That's why they call them a house show, because it's just for the house, right? It has nothing to do with the storylines. It is not, progressing the stories and some of the things that are moving WWE along the line. Would I take this over the Raw on Netflix debut? Probably not. I would take Raw on Netflix, right, over AEW World's End. But in this case, I'm going to take AEW World's End. And as watching it, because I won't be at either event, I will be watching AEW Full Gear. I'll know what happens at the house show. But if I don't ever find out what happens at the house show, it will be less important than me knowing what happens at AEW Full Gear. So definitely watching Full Gear this weekend. Should be a good show. And tailing and trailing off of AEW, they say Full Gear. I'm at World's End. I said AEW World's End. That's what I'll be watching this weekend. But to continue from that, next weekend, New Japan, Wrestle Kingdom 19. It's the traditional January 4th show. It will be the 34th Tokyo Dome show. That is under that traditional Tokyo Dome on January 4th banner. Wrestle Kingdom in its 19th under that name specifically. And I have to say, I don't know if it's because of AEW just existing in general. We talk about we love to have alternatives in wrestling. We talk about how we love to have competition. We love to have other companies out there. And to be honest with you, as a wrestling fan, I didn't need AEW to exist to have alternatives for WWE. Because we had alternatives. New Japan Wrestle Kingdom was that alternative. Ring of Honor, right, was thriving much higher and much greater as an alternative before AEW existed, right? So we had those alternatives before, and I think Wrestle Kingdom is a good example because people like myself who's looked outside of WWE, maybe in 2018 and 2017, we only had places like Wrestle Kingdom to go if we wanted to watch 40-minute 5-star Dave Meltzer matches. Now we have AEW, so we don't necessarily need that. But New Japan still exists. These Tokyo Dome shows still exist. And, essentially, a lot of the stars you recognize from AEW still are a part of these shows. It just overall, I would say the luster of who's on these cards, you know what I mean? The Chris Jericho's getting involved like they did back in the day, or the Cody Rhodes getting involved, or the Will Ospreay's getting involved, which got some of us fringe fans like myself who aren't familiar watching New Japan year-round involved in watching things like Wrestle Kingdom. But either way, it is still happening. They're still putting on a show, and some matches that are of interest before then AEW comes into town the very next night is Naoto and Takahashi. Naito versus Takahashi. Those are two of the mainstays in New Japan. Those are two people who have yet to officially come over to the AEW side of things. As we have Takahashi, over Naito in what is always a classic match in Japan. I'll be honest with you, I can't tell you exactly what storyline or what rivalry these two are going through for this match, but this is one of, if not the main event of this pay-per-view, right? And then the World Championship on the line. We saw him probably, if you're an AEW fan, recently, right, at Forbidden Door. But Zack Sabre Jr., who is currently the IWGP World Heavyweight Champion in New Japan, against Shota Umino, right? And to people like myself, we'll be getting a little taste of who this is, right? Because we don't necessarily watch a lot of New Japan, but I will be interested in this specifically because it is for the IWGP World Heavyweight Championship on New Japan's biggest show. So I'll be tuning in to that match, right? Specifically, very interested to see. And to start the show, we actually have a battle royal to determine the number one contender for the IWGP World Heavyweight Championship at a future date. Very interested to see who's even in that battle royal. That's also kind of something that is part of Wrestle Kingdom. We've seen before these battle royals on the pre-shows. So interesting to see. But for the rest of the card, I mean, there's a few people you'd recognize, from, like, let's say Evil or Hiroshi Tanahashi. He's on this card as well. So, you got some other matches of intrigue if you are a AEW, New Japan, overall wrestling fan. David Finlay's on the card. He'll be defending his IWGP Global Heavyweight Championship as well in one of the, I would say, multiple main events, if you will, one of the top matches on the card. But, if you're somebody like myself who's looking to get that fix again of AEW, but with, New Japan, but with the names we recognize, that's what Wrestle Dynasty is, right? So the very next day, Wrestle Dynasty, that's the match you may want to watch. That's the card you may want to see. Because that has Kenny Omega returning to the ring, right, against Gabe Kidd, right? You got that Shota Umino, right, who's going for the World Championship of IWGP the night before. If you don't catch him during Wrestle Kingdom, you're going to catch him in this pay-per-view against Claudio Gastonoli of the Death Riders. Right, you're going to see the Young Bucks in action against the Great Khan and, to be determined, for the IWGP Tag Team Championships. You got the International Women's Cup Finals. Now, this has been going on throughout Dynamite and other different programs with Stardom, CMLL, Ring of Honor, and AEW, specifically Athena of Ring of Honor, Willow Nightingale of AEW. So you have that match on the pre-show. You got Ring of Honor Tag Team Championships on the line with Dusty Rhodes and Sammy Guevara against the House of Torture in the pre-show as well, right? Zack Sabre Jr., right, your world champion, if he's still the world champion after Wrestle Kingdom 19, against Ricochet, right? You have Jack Perry against Yota Tsuji, right? Which is another, this feels like kind of like Forbidden Door, right? So you have David Finlay from the night before, right? He is that global champion taking on Brody King. You've got Mercedes Moné going up against Mina Shikawa, right, for the Strong Women's Championship and the Undisputed British Women's Championship. Shikawa has the British Championship. Mercedes Moné currently still has the New Japan Strong Women's Championship, right? So you currently have that match. And then you also have a gauntlet match, an 8-man lucha gauntlet match, 4 New Japan wrestlers and 4 CMLL wrestlers, all to be announced. So you don't necessarily have like the AEW World Championship on the line. You don't have Jon Moxley involved. But either way, I think this pay-per-view with, the 9 matches on the card might be even stronger than Wrestle Kingdom. It might be even stronger than AEW World's End. So, either way, this is going to be an interesting week of wrestling for AEW, right? As they not just have their own pay-per-view going up against WWE's house show, but then they go to Japan and essentially on night 2 of Wrestle Kingdom are putting on a pay-per-view in which looks like Wrestle Kingdom to the naked eye. Because again, many years ago, I tuned into Wrestle Kingdom to see Jericho and Omega and Will Ospreay and Cody Rhodes and some of these former WWE guys and these main stars that, I can recognize outside of being a New Japan diehard like the Young Bucks and be interested in seeing that kind of crossover appeal. And frankly, because AEW exists, the crossover appeal is now in this pay-per-view, which is Wrestling Dynasty, which is essentially AEW New Japan Forbidden Door, but the Japan side of things. So we have Forbidden Door, right, take place in the United States normally or North America. This time it's Japan's chance to host an AEW New Japan Forbidden Door. So either way, I think if I had to rank these pay-per-views, of their importance, I guess, especially to North American wrestling fans, I would probably put AEW World's End, right, number 1 of interest. But I would put Wrestle Dynasty as number 2 before Wrestle Kingdom 19. And that's crazy to say. And I don't know if, that's going to matter in Japan. I don't know because, New Japan, it's its own thing. It's got its own kind of crowd. It's treated differently over there. But I'm very curious to see which night gets more people. Wrestle Kingdom 19 on January the 4th or AEW New Japan's and CMLL's event, Wrestle Dynasty, on January the 5th. All from the Tokyo Dome. So should be interesting to see. And hey, it's crazy to think, but before you know it, right, there's going to be AEW Fight for the Fallen coming up not too far after that as well, right, on television. So you got Fight for the Fallen, you got AEW, and they even got, New Year's Smash coming up, which is a big time, I would say, Dynamite event. But from a pay-per-view perspective, AEW is involved. Wrestle Dynasty, you got CMLL, AEW, New Japan, Ring of Honor, and Stardom all coming together on January 5th. You got Wrestle Kingdom, which is always a good event no matter who you root for, right? It's kind of a bucket list thing for me to attend a Wrestle Kingdom. I wonder to what extent, Wrestle Kingdom kind of keeps its importance on the calendar, and maybe like a Wrestle Dynasty or AEW's involvement, kind of bleeds over into Wrestle Kingdom. Maybe in the future, Wrestle Kingdom is a joint production with AEW, and maybe AEW World's End kind of fades away, and Wrestle Kingdom kind of becomes a major event on the AEW and New Japan calendar as a joint production. We will see. But heading into the new year, right, as AEW is running all these big pay-per-views and WWE is running house shows, it's going to be AEW, the most important, I guess, company as the year is coming out, but that's only for a short period of time because, like I said, Raw's Netflix is coming on January the 6th. The Royal Rumble is right around the corner, and before the Royal Rumble, there's Saturday night's main event. So WWE is going to be taking the spotlight real soon, but for the remainder of 2024, AEW is trying to go out with a bang, and we'll see exactly how successful they are with that.